You're listening to the Free to Be Mindful podcast, which invites you along on a journey to learn of mindful living, grow in mental health, and inspire through personal growth. In a world where we can often feel much stress and overwhelm, this podcast provides bite-sized tips and real talk conversations, empowering you to embrace mindfulness and nurture your full potential. I'm your host, Vanessa De Jesus Guzman, educator, licensed professional counselor, entrepreneur, and mom. I'm passionate about helping others live life with peace of mind and ease of heart without losing their, here we go. Hello and welcome to episode 169 of the Free to Be Mindful podcast. I hope that you're feeling good, looking good, and doing better in this world than you were yesterday. So if you're listening to the podcast in real time, today, October 10th, is World Mental Health Day. And while, yes, there are a lot of national days that are out there that people celebrate, this one I enjoy. It's so important that we remember that just as physical health is important, our mental health is important as well. And that's why I'm so excited to have this guest on today. We actually met just recently, and he was so great that I said, I have to have you on the Free to Be Mindful podcast. His name is Greg Ryder, and Greg is an internationally acclaimed musician. Beyond music, he's so interesting. Beyond music, Greg has embarked on a transformative 4-month tour across Canada, connecting with students, educators, and becoming a sought-after speaker. He's not only a speaker, but a musician, and he puts that all together, and it must be amazing. Greg also has a commitment to mental health advocacy, co-founding a charity and hosting the Greg Ryder Show, which can be found on YouTube, which addresses critical societal topics reflecting his enduring dedication to mental health. And that's exactly why I'm so glad that I am sharing Greg Ryder with you today on World Mental Health Day. I hope that you really enjoy this conversation, but that you get something out of it. And friends, before you even hear what exactly it's about, I ask you that if you feel this can help somebody that you know, whether it's a friend, a family member, or even just sharing it on your social media channels, I greatly appreciate it, as I know the message can greatly benefit somebody out there who may be struggling with similar things. So without further ado, here we go. I'm so excited to have Greg Ryder here with us. And Greg, I'll have you know before you even say hello that you are actually the first male guest to ever appear on the Free to Be Mindful podcast. But I thought it was super duper apropos. Let the guests know. Greg and I are part of an awesome brand building group. And I met him there, and he was sharing something really interesting about himself, which I'll let him share in a little while. And I said, did you know that October is the month for that thing? So I'd love to have you on the podcast. And here we are. So thank you so much for taking time out to join us, and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's an honor to be the first male guest. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about kind of my story and my journey. And yeah, I did not know that October was ADHD Awareness Month.
There it is.
I feel like there's national everything every single day, so it's hard to keep up with all the national days in the month. So, but you know what? This is I guess this is my new month.
Yes. And sometimes it's just like a National Taco Day, which that is the day that of this recording. But when we say ADHD Awareness Month, that's a little bit, it holds more weight to it. So I'm happy that we can not just bring light to it, but also celebrate it, because it's nothing to be ashamed of. And when you shared that in our group, I said, how awesome, because there's so many people that have that as adults, but we don't talk about it because we really relate it to kids. So I wanted to give you the platform to share a little bit about yourself, and we'll get into that with time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Yeah, it's been a recent discovery in my life. Like I just learned I had it 2 years ago. So really I've only been living with it with the knowledge that I had it for 2 years. So there was obviously some things in the past that I was just like, there's got to be something different about my brain, but I could never actually pinpoint it, and I could never get led in the right answers. And it was definitely frustrating for quite a few years, because I would just go on these massive like downs and these highs, and I feel like I couldn't find the balance in my life. And I was like, man, there's something up, because like now I'm 31 years old. I still haven't got traction. I still feel like, I'm swimming and wandering and can't get any traction. That's when I started talking to a friend that was like, dude, you're so ADHD, it's not even funny. And I was like, you think so? And he's like, oh my God, yes. And I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. And so I started just going research crazy and trying to figure out how to get tested, who to get tested by, and all that fun stuff.
Wow. So we're going to put a pin on that for a moment because it's so great to get into that. And it's so interesting that that's the way it came about. But I'd love to go backwards to let us know how you were as a kid, now that we know exactly the topic that we're going to be discussing today, but also let us know what you do and what you've made a career out of.
Yeah. So I am a musician. That's kind of what I've been making my name off of for the last 5, 6 years. As a kid, I was your class clown. I was your always trying to make people laugh and entertain them in the class, and teachers did not like me because of that. But I was always just, yeah, rambunctious. And my favorite activity, my favorite subject was gym. I love that one. I love to run around and just burn off energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was always that kid, very rambunctious. In high school, I played a lot of sports. I was kind of known as just the guy that, played a lot of sports, never really had a plan for his life. Kind of, it was almost like very nonchalant. Like it looked like it didn't weigh on me that much. It looked like I was this free and easy, confident guy. But then like behind closed doors, I was like, what am I doing? Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Like, I felt like everyone had this plan around me except for me. And I went into sports broadcasting because it was something that just kind of interested me at the time, and started taking that route, went to college for it. And it started stemming off as like, this is not something that I want to do. And after I was actually in an internship, and I got in a car crash on the way home from this internship, and it really changed the trajectory of my life. And I realized that I wasn't really happy doing this. And I started to really think a lot about regret and a lot about like, my legacy. And if that car crash would have taken my life, how would I be remembered?
Wow.
And I realized that like, it was not who I wanted to be. And after that, it was like kind of a light switch went off in my head. And I started to almost stop hanging out with my party friends. I stopped hanging out with all the people that were kind of not doing the best for me. And I started reading personal development. I started to invest into books and courses. And that's when it really started my personal development journey. And yeah, I've been on that journey for the last 10 years of kind of learning. And then I started playing music, and I been making kind of some career moves off that, and spent some time down in Nashville playing music. And yeah, I play a lot of shows, and that's kind of how I made my living right now.
What a story. Oh my goodness. And I have a couple of questions for you about it. Taking it back to your childhood days, before I became a therapist, I was a second grade teacher. So I remember those kids in class that couldn't sit still and that always had to be moving. And that favorite class was, well, after recess, other
Yeah,
favorite time of the day was PE because they needed to just get that energy out. So I
yeah.
remember little guys like you. Did you enjoy school back then, being that you always had to move around and had a hard time focusing?
No, like I always struggled with school. It was always just something like, if it just makes so much sense now, but it was always
Yeah.
like, I loved, I loved when there was like an interesting, like, I love creative writing. I used to love when we got to write a story, or, write something in English class, and I got to really get in on that. But it was, yeah, the very boring kind of subject, very hard for me to pay attention and focus. And yeah, it was just never really could grab my attention.
Yeah, and I asked that question knowing that you would probably going to answer that way. A lot of parents and educators listen into this podcast, and I think it's so important that they hear answers like that because we never want to turn kids off, especially when they're young. We want to keep that love for learning alive because that's what happens, right? You have all of these talents. You were musically talented, you loved creative writing, and then you kind of turn off because a spark, dies to a degree, and then they just lose the love for learning. And it doesn't mean that you can't be successful. It just means that paper and pencil may not be your thing. So nowadays, there's just so many different ways of learning. And let's say if somebody enjoys creative writing but doesn't like the actual writing part, you can use speech to text and have them just say the story out loud. And it's all about finding different ways on how to engage kids so that they don't lose their love for whatever it is that they're passionate about.
Hmm. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
So then you go off, you're doing this internship that you weren't a fan of. It seems like you knew that this is not the way, your path that you should have been on. And then this car accident, that must have been, I mean, obviously a pivotal moment in your life.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely knew, but at that age, it was like my only goal was finishing college. It was just like I just had to finish it. Might not be something I want to do for the rest of my life, but I was just like, I want to finish what I started, and I'm going to get my degree, and then I can move on with my life after that. So it was more of just kind of checking the boxes at that point, and I was kind of running through it was very I was running through the motions of his internship. I could tell I wasn't going to accept a job there if they wanted me to work there after the internship. I knew I was just kind of waiting for it to all be over and then I can kind of move on with my life. And then this car crash obviously changed things much, much faster for me. And yeah, I just remember it really put me into a big spell of a dark place. And I didn't leave my bed for about 4 days straight.
Mm.
And I just felt this massive weight come down on me. Like it was the first time I really felt like anxiety, like kind of a rock bottom moment where I was like, I feel like I've just wasted my life, working towards sports broadcasting. It's not what I want to do. Now I'm 22 years old and I still have no idea, like no plan of what to do next. And that pressure just really weighed on me. And yeah, I don't wish that upon anyone.
It's not a great feeling. And if anybody hasn't experienced that, it's not that you're just feeling lazy and don't want to get out of bed, but it's a feeling that you physically are not able to, right? Like even sometimes to use the bathroom, it's just so heavy because you're such in a state where looking at it from a clinical perspective sounds like maybe a period of depression until you were able to find your way. And here in the podcast, we talk about mindful living, mental health, and personal growth. And we describe mindful living as paying attention to the right here and right now with kindness and curiosity about towards whatever it is that's happening or towards yourself and letting that aspect of judgment go. And it seems that despite being in a dark place for a period of time, you still had the awareness to pay attention to something's got to change. This is not the way I want to live, and there has to be something bigger for me than what I'm experiencing now.
Yeah, 100%. It was like I knew that change had to happen. It was just where do I start? And yeah, I still remember just my mom coming down and she was like, "Hey Greg, like I know you're not feeling too good right now. Like, you know, just finish up this internship, get back to it and let's finish it and let's move on." And yeah, I actually found that day when I went back to the internship. My mom dropped me off at this bookstore because I was actually meeting my boss because the plan was now that I wrote my car off and I had no way of getting there. My mom was going to drive me halfway and my boss was going to come pick me up.
Wow.
So he dropped me off at this bookstore, and I remember I was sitting in the window of Starbucks, kind of looking out in the parking lot, and I was like, I'm so tired of thinking, like I can't right now. So I just went and walked around the bookstore, and I found myself in the self-help section, and I was just like kind of browsing through some titles, and then a book from Dale Carnegie just it felt like it was just glowing on the shelf, and it was called Stop Worrying and Start Living. And it was the first book I ever read in the personal development self-help way. And this book really was like, this is what I'm feeling. Like,
Wow.
I am paralyzed with worry. I'm paralyzed of fear. And like, that was the book that really was like, okay, this is it. Like, you are just incredibly worried and you just don't think you're going to live up to the potential that maybe you set in your head or whatever it was. And yeah, that kind of started me on my path to kind of really discovering what my true purpose in life was.
Yeah. And so often, when we think of like mindfulness, people think of meditation, right? That you have to be sitting crisscross and like fingers touching and oming, and all of a sudden you find yourself magically like floating on air next to a pile of rocks. But it sounds like while you were at that store, looking out the window, you had a moment of you were experiencing mindfulness. It sounds like just thinking about something's got to give, and then walking around and finding yourself there. It doesn't sound like that was a coincidence. It sounded like that was what your soul needed. And whatever it was got you to that book that sounds like really made an impact.
Yeah, it definitely did. It started me on my journey. And yeah.
Wow. So where do we go from that to now being a musician? What happened in between that space?
So it was really just kind of, I knew that like when I always, my first love was always public speaking. I won a couple of awards back in elementary school, and I love speech season was my favorite. It was like me in a time when my mom got to really like, she loved writing speeches, and we'd get together and we'd write these speeches. So it's a very good memory. And that was my first love. And I remember when this all happened, I was always like, I was watching Tony Robbins speak at like an Oprah Winfrey. He was on Oprah, and I remember
Okay.
watching this performance, and I was like, and I looked at my grandma. I was like, I want to do that. Like, just the way he walked on the stage, and everyone's eyes were just locked on him, and he had this inspiring message. And I was like, I would love to do that one day. And
Wow.
then, yeah, my grandma was like, I can see you doing that. So I started to kind of like, okay, what am I going to talk about? Because I feel like I'm 21 years old. I came from this middle class family that really gave me everything I needed. I didn't see that car crash as anything. That took me many years to actually get in my head on that. It was a turning point. So for I was like, man, like I have no story. Like I had no
Mm.
story of like I wasn't born with something. I wasn't, I didn't lose a limb. I always felt like I didn't have a cool story. So I was like, I just want to like, I want to do things. I just want to like take massive risks and massive like go after these interests that I have and almost start to really build my story. And then maybe one day down the road, I get to package this all and I get to speak about it. So like I just started taking massive risks, and I opened up a clothing company with my best friend. We started really tackling entrepreneurship, and then it was just I did everything for the story. It was nothing to do with stability. It was like I'm just going to run 100 miles per hour and hope that something happens. So yeah, no plan. I moved to a bunch of cities. I've lived in 3 different countries, 5
Wow.
different cities. I've, lived in California. I just started going, and I found music along the way.
That is amazing. And it's so interesting because for our listeners, if you're not watching this, it can also be found on YouTube. And as soon as you started talking about seeing Tony Robbins on Oprah, like your face lit up. So I can definitely see that it lights you up. There was a sudden change to your face. And it's so awesome that you took advantage and took those risks, because so many people get caught up in the planning, right? Like you said, the checking of the boxes before doing things a quote unquote right way or what you're supposed to do, but you don't know what you're really not worthy of, but you don't know what you're capable of until you take those risks. And albeit hard, and sometimes you don't have the answers, but you just got to jump and see what happens. So
Mm-hmm.
lived in all these places, and what happened?
Yeah. So I really just, and I look back on that, and I think that, man, like, yeah, I might not have the nice home that I like invested into, but like, and I might not have a family or, whatever, the things that you almost felt like you needed growing up.
Mm.
But I've had so much life experience, and like I've got to do such cool and unique things in my life that like I knew that now I can kind of use all the things I've done to really kind of take the next step in my life. And for a long time, it was just like I just feel like I'm wandering. I feel like I'm
Okay.
wandering, like as much as I was a wander and I love doing it, there was also a negative side to it where it was like I was running away from a lot of things.
Mm.
Like the impulsivity of it all was, yeah, I chalk it up to life experience, but like there was also some things I was running away from. And, I was so afraid of confrontation that I would literally move away from a country to
Literally
not
move.
to not have that confrontation. Like I was just such a once I make up my mind and go somewhere, I want to go somewhere, I'm out.
You're gone.
And you can't stop me. So I never really did, long distance relationships. I never did long-term relationships. I was just this single guy that was just kind of just roaming. And yeah, it's so ADHD. It's not even funny now that I look back on it and I'm like, oh my God, you were so freaking impulsive. Like
Mm.
you needed that adventure and the dopamine, and you needed those things that just like that fueled you. And then all of a sudden, 3-4 months later, I'd get bored of the city. I'd get bored of like taking it on and making it my mission. And then all of a sudden, yes, I'm doing it. Okay, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
It just kept going. So I was never really building a foundation. I was just like stacking on all these stories and whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of what happened. Then like my one big story is I moved to the Cayman Islands where I was a bartender at age 26. And I was playing music around the islands. I was getting known as kind of the country guy. And some girl walked up to me and she's like, "Hey, I don't mean to be rude, but like, what are you doing on an island? Like, you're too
Mm.
talented to like be living here. Like, you need to be in a big city doing music." And
Wow.
I was like, "Where?" And she's like, "Go to Nashville or I go to LA." And I was like, no, I don't think I'm good enough to do music there. And she's like, "No, you are. Like, I live in Nashville. Like, come and visit me." So I visited her on a 10-day trip. And my plan was to just like have some fun, have a couple drinks, maybe sing a karaoke song, maybe get up to sing a song in Nashville.
Just
I'd
have a
have been
good
happy
time.
with that. I would have been happy with that. But on the fourth day, I booked a show in Nashville by talking to the right person, the right bartender. And she was like, "I can't offer you much, but I can offer you a gig on Sunday nights from 8 to 11 for $100." And as I was walking back to my hotel that night, I was like, "Okay, wait a minute. I just booked a show in Nashville in 4 days. What could I do in 3 months?" And I woke up the next morning. I canceled my flight back to the Cayman Islands and I stayed in Nashville. And that
Wow.
10-day trip turned into almost 2 years of me being in Nashville.
That's so amazing. But that again, you gave yourself the space of like following, like, wait a second, what's going to be my best move here? What's going to be the best thing for me? You gave yourself the space to really consider it and look at what it's turned into. That is amazing. And you keep saying you're searching for a story, but Greg, like your whole life are like all these different stories that now you have so much to speak of. And that's what you do now, right?
That's exactly what I'm building. Like I'm now taking my last 10 years and I'm trying to just define it and bring it into this keynote that like my goal is to create a one-man show where I can speak about my story and then also sing songs,
Sing
do
us
a
a
little
song.
comedy, and just kind of really make this like presentation that like inspires people, empowers people, gives them hope, and just kind of make this big keynote that I can present.
That's amazing. Well, I can't wait to see when you get there. So you're going to have to let me know when this one man show takes off with these three different components. But I want to take it back now to where we started. So you had that conversation with your friend and he said, "Man, you're so ADHD." And typically as a licensed therapist, I dislike it when we use those words. Like people say like, "Oh, I'm so OCD" because you like things organized, or, "I'm so blank" just because you kind of fit like maybe one criteria out of the many for this diagnosis. But in this case for you, it seemed like it was really important that that conversation was had because that's what got you going, and you yourself took the steps to see different doctors and such to get this diagnosis.
Yeah. So at 24, I was misdiagnosed, and I was told that I had an anxiety disorder. And I remember, I was very, very in a dark spot again. Like, I was still, doing my story, but I hit a couple patches along the way. And I obviously hit a couple rock bottoms along the way, trying to be this person. And I remember I drove myself to the doctors, and I was like, I just can't shake these negative thoughts. Like, I just don't know what to do. And he said, sounds like you have anxiety. I went to a psychiatrist. They talked about a disorder that I had, and they started giving me medication. So I went on that for 2 weeks, and I was like, I got to get off this. I got to get on, like, how can I do this naturally? And that's when I started to do meditation and started to implement that stuff in my life. But my whole life, I'm just like, I'm just a guy that has anxiety. I have a little bit of depression. I always felt like every single time I talked about mental health, I felt like I was kind of talking about it, but I didn't know I had it. Like, I didn't know that I had something. So I'm like, I don't want to make this a sob story about my anxiety or my depression. Like, maybe I didn't have it. Maybe everyone feels like this. Maybe I'm just one in a million that just feels like this. And then when ADHD came up, I was like, man, like, I'm just going to take this route, and I'm going to see it, and I'm going to see if this is something that could be me. And, then learning about it, I was just like, yeah, you get misdiagnosed with anxiety and depression, and it's very closely related to ADHD. And I just said to myself, I'm going to take this route. And even if it doesn't end up what I want it to be, or with a proper diagnosis, at least I can check that off, and then maybe move to the next thing.
Yeah.
But I always knew there was something different about me. And I think for a long time, no one really believed me. And when I got diagnosed that day, like, when I got that paper, and I remember calling my mom and just sobbing, and I was just
Wow.
crying. And I was like, I'm like, not in a way to like prove it to her, but I was like, I was right. Like,
You knew it.
all those nights I couldn't sleep. All those nights I told you that, like, my brain is just on fire. It was always like, yeah, you eat too much sugar. You need to run around. You need to burn off energy. And then I was like, I was right. I was like, for all
Mhm.
that year, I knew there was something different about me. And I finally had that answer.
Yeah, so amazing. And I'm so sorry it took that long and misdiagnoses and medications to get there. Sometimes that's the journey of mental health, because we all have mental health, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer. And ADHD is often misdiagnosed for anxiety because it does have a lot of things that can look really similar. And when we think about it in kids, right? So there's ADHD either inattentive, where you have a hard time focusing, or hyperactive, where you just have too much energy and you don't know how to almost contain it in your body. And in kids, we see it really easily, right? Like, we see somebody who interrupts somebody else, or they're all over the place, or they're always, dazing out at a cloud somewhere. But in adults, because we learn social awareness and social cues, instead of, let's say, cutting somebody off, you're just going to look at your watch and get going, instead of maybe dazing off in the middle of a meeting, you're still like looking at your watch and kind of like looking around, shifting in your seats. So sometimes we don't even realize. I can see how this happened for you. You don't even realize, that something's happening, but you don't know what it can be, because you just learn how to just navigate the situation so that you're still socially appropriate in these different, places and with these different situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I wanted to share with the listeners too, while we're here, of what adult ADHD symptoms may look like, because I think it's important to understand that it's not just a kid thing, it's not just a teen thing. You can have it diagnosed later on in life, but it's important. So this is the disclaimer and the asterisk and the big exclamation point, that you don't diagnose yourself, right? That you go to a doctor, that you go to a psychiatrist or a licensed therapist, because you're unable. Even somebody who is trained should not diagnose themselves. We have to leave that to the trained professionals that can see outside of ourselves looking in.
And I was told that, and a lot of people were like, Greg, like, you have ADHD, just self-diagnose yourself. And I'm just like, I can't just like say I have something without having it, because, like, yeah, it's just, and I think a lot of people do that. A lot of people with, like, they watch videos or they see people on social media and they're like, oh, that's me. That's me. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's me
got
right
it off of
there.
TikTok. And now I have
Yeah.
ADHD.
Yeah. Oh, I have ADHD. And it's just like, it's almost like it's a buzzword almost.
Right.
And I've been seeing so much of that on social media that like, and I was talking about that like a couple of days ago. It's like, there's so many people talking about the goofiness and the little tricks that people with ADHD do, but like, they're like, oh, our caffeine consumption, our, inability to focus, like it's all fun and games, but then they don't talk about the really dark side of,
Mhm.
like when we're on a slide, we're on a slide. Like if we're not on like the straight and narrow and, we're starting to go back on the other side of the cliff, like it's a
Mm.
very steep climb, steep decline into some bad stuff.
I'm glad that
Um,
you mentioned that because some people do look at, I say like a ping pong ball, right? You're just bouncing all over the place. But there is so much more to it than just the hyperactivity. And sometimes not even the hyperactivity. Sometimes it's the inattentiveness that can turn into then something darker, as you're saying. So,
yeah.
some symptoms of adult ADHD, again, not to self diagnose, but just to inform and educate, can include impulsivity. It can include disorganization or problems prioritizing of what to do first, or should I go to this situation first more than that one, right? Poor time management skills, not only getting to places on time, but how to get things done in a timely manner. Problems focusing on a task, problems multitasking, excessive activity or restlessness, poor planning, low frustration tolerance, frequent mood swings, which speaks to what you were just talking about, problems following through and completing tasks, sometimes a temper, and trouble coping with stress, especially if it goes undiagnosed. And I feel like some people are like, oh, it's just a title, right? I don't need it diagnosed, how you were saying. But once you do have that diagnosis from a trained and licensed professional, then you know how to help yourself. Then you know what you can do in order to live your best life. So, since you've gotten the diagnosis, how has it helped you?
Oh my God. The person I've become in the last 2 years, it makes me emotional just because I've done such a massive change. And, I quit drinking in October 2021, coming up on 2 years sober. And I
Congratulations.
just I just said to myself, I'm like, if I ever want to be my best, like I've got to knock off the things that have been holding me back. And I said to my doctor, I was like, I don't want to do ADHD medication. Like, how do I cope with this? And she's like, we need to talk about your alcohol consumption. Yeah, you're addicted to nicotine. I was smoking cigarettes at that time and vaping. Um, and I was just doing all these really bad things. And I just knocked off everything. I just woke up one morning. I'm like, I'm done drinking. I'm done smoking. I'm just going on this path, just figuring out, and I started training for a marathon and started getting back into
Wow.
exercise. And I just dove right into just like making myself better. And yeah, it was just so much work that first year of, staying away from my livelihood. My livelihood was music. It was
Yeah.
playing in bars. And that was my identity. So to have to change that, and I didn't want to go to bars as much. I was spending a lot of time inside, and there was definitely some dark times, but like I just knew that I was just walking through it. And yeah, after about the first year of not drinking is when I started to really start to open up again and start to kind of come back to where I was. And just I was starting to feel whole again after about a year of sobriety. And now I feel like I'm just a completely different man now.
That's amazing. And thank you for your vulnerability because so often people think like bippity boppity boo, like let's blink your eyes and then all of a sudden change person, right? But I'm glad that you're keeping it real with us, that you're saying it took work. It took a long time, that you sometimes go through dark times or maybe times of isolation when you're trying to change your lifestyle to something else and everybody around you is doing that thing that you need to or that you're choosing to stay away from. So, for all the listeners and viewers, you can do it. So, did you have support in place to help you become this better version of yourself?
No, and I wish I did. I think
Mm,
I've always been very stubborn about asking for help. I've always just figured I could do it by myself. And as long as I can hold myself accountable and hold myself on this path, then I can do it. But it started for me, it became a responsibility because I started to see people start to change their lives when I started to change mine. And
I bet.
I almost felt like I'm responsible for them. That if they're going to continue on their path of righteousness, then I've got to stay on mine. And it almost started to become like I didn't have anyone checking on me, but I had people that I felt I was holding accountable by me keeping on my clean track.
Wow. It's amazing that you were able to hold that drive and motivation for yourself and then for those people who are you cared for.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm the kind of guy that everyone thought I had it all figured out for so long that like I did button it up and that I had everything figured out. So I think for me is like I just needed to do the things that I had to do. And friends would come to me and say, "Hey man, I see you've been sober for 6 months. I quit drinking." Whatever it was, like I showed people that you go from this Nashville party country artist that is drinking pretty much multiple nights a week to like this sober guy. Like the change was just so pivotal that they're like, okay, if Greg can do it, like I can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you're an inspiration for who knows how many people, probably more than you probably know.
Hey, that's what I hope, and yeah, that's exactly it. It's just I feel like I almost feel like I'm giving up on the people that have followed me if I go back. If I go back to my old ways, then I'm almost just undoing all the work that I've done.
Wow. So you have, again, amazing stories, plural, of everything that you've been through, good, bad, and everything in between to make you the very young 31-year-old that you are today. Where do you see yourself in about 10 years from now?
Well, I'm not that young 31-year-old anymore, but
Oh,
I'm
yeah, okay.
34. No, but I see myself just, with the brand builders group and what we're doing is just helping me to take this last 10 years and it's just sprayed from all different events and different stories. And it's just helping me kind of really tighten it up. And I'm so excited to that's my dream is to do speaking and to host my own live events and just give people a show that they're not used to seeing. And I want to just bring a show that's just new and exciting and just something different.
Yeah, and I'm sure it'll be in addition to being new and exciting and something different, I'm sure it'll be memorable, right? Not just somebody talking to you or at you, but with music and with humor. That's just going to be amazing. So I can't wait to see it. You're going to have to let me know. I'll have to make a trip out to Nashville, wherever it is that you are. So,
Mhm.
thinking about what we've talked about and everything that Free to Be Mindful is all about, what is your favorite way now to either engage in mindful living or your favorite way to take care of your mental health?
For me, it's been learning how to bring structure into my life and really kind of buttoning up my routines. And I think for me is like that's the difference between a good day and a bad day. A good day where I feel productive and I feel like I did a lot is the days that I did my morning routine. I wrote down a to-do list. I got my board behind me. I checked off all my stuff for today. And I see the things checked off and then I write a W on the board for win the day. It's like when I do those things, I'm just like, yes, but it's the days that I get up and I'm feeling overly anxious and I just feel like the day's taking a charge of me. So just being proactive and building structure into my life. And I just keep on checking off days and days and days. And if I just keep winning day after day, then eventually it's going to lead to bigger wins.
I love that you mentioned that because that's such an important skill. especially for anybody who feels like they have a little bit of trouble with their executive functioning skills. I remember when I first wrote you the email and you said, I'm responding to you now so that I don't let it get away from me. And sometimes you don't have to have the ADHD diagnosis in order to do things like this, to put really good routines and daily habits into your life that are just going to help you conquer the day instead of letting the day win over you. So that's a great strategy for anybody who feels like that's an area of for growth, for opportunity for growth.
Yeah, it's the executive functioning. It's tricky sometimes. I read texts, I read emails, and then I just like put my phone down or like, oh, I was on a scroll or something like that. So like I'll check my email, I'll see something, and then I'd be like, crap, get back to work. And then I'm
Yep.
like, but now I didn't answer that email, and then that's on my brain. I didn't answer that text. So it's just like if I see something, I got to answer it right away. And but yeah, it's tricky. And you know what? It's such a world of you learn so much about yourself
Yeah.
and ADHD. And I just hope that, you know, if you're living silent and you're living undiagnosed and you just may think you have it, it doesn't hurt to explore that option and just to kind of to see what it could be. Because I'm telling you, if you get the answer that you're seeking, it'll be one of the most amazing days of your life because you finally feel like someone finally understands you. And it's like for the
Mm.
first time, like, oh my God, I don't feel so misunderstood.
What an awesome way to close. I'm just going to leave it right there because that was a great way to bring it to a close. And I thank you so much for sharing your story and for being vulnerable and for helping us know more about ADHD in adults. It's much more out there than we think. And again, like you said, if people need to reach out for help, do so. And it can definitely change your life. So,
Mm-hmm.
Greg, where can we find you and all the amazing things you're doing?
Yeah. So on Instagram, it's just Greg Ryder official. Ryder spelled Rider. And I just actually launched my new podcast yesterday.
Nice.
And it's called The Greg Ryder Show on YouTube. And yeah, it's talking about, you know, we're just doing in studio interviews, but yeah, just talking to people, finding out their life stories on how they got to where they are. So yeah, that's kind of where you can find me. And then, yeah, stop
Amazing.
by. Yeah.
Nice. The Greg Ryder Show on YouTube. Be sure to check that out. We'll be sure to place all of these links in the show notes so that you can find them, whether you're listening on your favorite podcast platform or whether you're viewing this on YouTube. Greg, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to get to know you some more, and I wish you all the best and very much success.
Awesome. Thanks, Vanessa.
How awesome was that? I'm so thankful to Greg for taking time out of his day and sharing his story with us. There's so much that we can learn from each and every single person that we meet. And I'll be honest with you, the guests that I've had on the podcast thus far have all been personal friends of mine, right? I just called them up and they're so amazing. And I just asked them, would you like to be a guest? And this was the first male, but also the first person outside of my immediate or secondary circle that I asked to be on the podcast. And it was a little scary. I didn't know Greg. I had just met him as a part of this brand builders group that we're a part of. I'll share about that in a second. And he graciously said yes. So I share that with you because if there's something that you're scared of, whether it's you're scared to go to the doctor, or maybe you're feeling something and you think it might be something big, we have to push through the fear because you never know what it is that you're going to find out on that other side. So push through the fear and you will be surprised of the wonderful things you can achieve. I also wanted to share with you, by the way, a couple of tips that may help adults with ADHD. So these are just quick tips. There's so many more out there, but perhaps these can help you even if you don't have the diagnosis. It can help you be a more productive and more efficient person. So the first thing is seek professional help. Again, push through that fear. You might get the diagnosis and then you know what to do and how to help yourself. The second thing is learn about what you're experiencing. We have the entire world in our hands, on our phones, at our disposal. So don't be afraid to also learn so that you can further help yourself. Greg talked about really staying organized and making sure that you have a routine. Our brains function best on routine. Think about your childhood elementary school days. You know exactly which days were music, which days were PE, which days were art. You knew exactly what was first and second and third period. And even as adults, our brains still function best in that way. Establishing a routine can help you stay organized and stay on track. Also, with these things that we have at our hands every single day, let's use these tools and technology to our disposal. There's so many things out there, and I know even that can get overwhelming. It's just a matter of finding what works for you, using tools like calendars, planners, task management apps, anything to help you stay organized and remember important dates and important tasks. I myself don't have this diagnosis, but the way that I've been living life recently, it's, "Hey Siri, can you remind me to do this on this date at this time?" And not only does it put it on the to-do list, but then it sends me the notification. So if I don't get to it right away, I know to check back to look for it. But I've had to also put that into the routine so I just don't swipe up and ignore the notification. Another tip can be to break tasks into smaller steps because when you look at doing one big thing, it can seem really overwhelming and it might very well be. But if you break things into smaller chunks, it makes it less daunting. Also, prioritize tasks. Really think about what is most important and urgent first, and then either delegate or eliminate or decrease the priority of things that are not as important. So, again, think about what has to be done right here and right now by me, and what are the things that can wait until later. Minimize distractions, and that's something that I do. My phone actually does it automatically. So I've already set it up that when I get to my office, that it turns it automatically into work mode. So that's another way to improve efficiency. Try to make things as automatic as possible so that you don't even have to think about that step. So as soon as I get to work, the phone knows my location. It goes into work mode, meaning that all texts and calls are shut off except if it's from an immediate family member. Maybe you want to turn off social media notifications altogether or shut them down after a certain time. And when we talk about prioritizing things and minimizing distractions, something else that can help us is just having good time management skills. And sometimes for some people, they take out a chunk of their day and they put all these things in a to do list and they can bang it out really quickly. But some of us don't have the attention span to do that for 3 hours, let's say. So instead of doing something all morning or all day or all weekend, do whatever it is you think it's going to work for you. If it's working, let's say for 30 minutes, taking a break to just walk around and then going back to work, that can be a really good way to keep yourself moving, but keep yourself productive. Just really be mindful of the times that you pick up your phone and start scrolling, because when you do that, you shift your brain from where it is in work mode to then play mode or scrolling mode, and then it can be really hard to shift back. So just keep that in mind. Get regular exercise. Make sure that you consistently move your body. That's going to help a lot of different things, including having a healthy diet, just so that you're eating foods that keep you energized and focused and not foods that are going to energize you for a minute and then have you crash. And I always say, sleep is the most underrated thing for whatever diagnosis or wellness thing that you're talking about. We want to make sure that we get a good amount of sleep. And not only that we get to sleep by a certain time, but also that we stay asleep during the night so that we can feel rested and ready to conquer the day the next day. My friends, I hope that you got a lot out of this conversation. And perhaps if it didn't speak to you, then please share it with a friend that you think this conversation can help. I greatly appreciate you sharing the Free to Be Mindful podcast with all who can benefit. And last but not least, Greg and I mentioned Brand Builders Group. We are a part of this awesome group of people who are helping us really identify our brand, but not only that, really put us on a runway to do big things. If you have a question about Brand Builders Group, if you're curious to know how it's going, send me a DM or an email, hello@freetobemindful.com. But it is working fantastically for me, and I'd love to share that with you. So, after hearing all of this information, just take a moment, think about what resonated most with you, and what's one thing, just one thing from everything you heard, from the tips, from the resources that you can do today. What's one thing that you can do today to make a difference in your life and have the courage to take that step and do it? And as always, remember, in a world where we are free to be anything that we want to be, we are always free to be mindful. Thanks so much, and catch you next time.